Welcome, brave souls, to the gathering. Tonight's tales twist through the darkest corners of imagination, where mind-born horrors thrive. Our growing circle dares to linger here. For lovers of dread, these stories are your companions. Listen closely as shadows whisper, and remember, once you step into the dark, it steps into you. Story 1. This is a story that happened when I was very young. It started around the time I was 5 back in the 80s, and was the beginning of the worst 5 years of my life. I was a teenage, unplanned pregnancy. So my mom was a single mom for the first few years of my life. It wasn't too bad, though. My mom and I were not alone. We lived with my mom's parents, my grandparents. My mom's younger sister was also still living at home. We were safe and happy. Then my mom met a guy. Let's call him Joe for privacy purposes. Joe seemed like a dream come true. He was nice to me and my mom. He took us places and brought us gifts. It was awesome. And when he proposed, my mom and I were both happy. They got married, and my mom thought we would now be a happy family. We didn't know how wrong we were. It started off great at first. We had left my grandparents and moved into a home together. We had some really good times. But things took a turn for the worse after the first few months. Joe had a really bad temper, and it would come out when my mom or I upset him. He would yell, throw things, and break stuff. Then he started hitting my mom and me. He would punch and kick us. He got worse and worse. He started beating me up to get back at my mom. It was a nightmare for 3 years. My mom was too scared to leave him or tell on him. I was too small when I told people thought I was lying, because I wanted to go back to my grandparents' house. The weirdest thing was Joe was a lot like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We had some really good times, vacations, holidays, and more. When he was nice, it was amazing. When his other side came out, it was beep. We did finally have something good and bad happen. My mom was pregnant. She was happy to be a mom again. And I was excited to be a big brother. It was also bad, though, because we were further tied to Joe. And who knew what he would do to the baby? When my baby brother was born, things were good for a while. We were pretty happy. I had withdrawn a lot, though I stayed in my room, watching TV and reading. I figured out of sight, out of mind. I thought if I avoided Joe, he wouldn't bother me. I should have continued this plan, but I was blinded with the happiness and peace that came with my brother's birth. It all started back one day. Joe had a toothache and was in a foul mood. He had been yelling at my mom all day. My brother was teething and had been fussy. So Joe was extra grumpy, yelling at her to get the baby quiet. My mom called me to dinner, and I walked out of my room. I was walking slowly and quietly because I didn't want to make Joe any more upset. Well, I guess I went too slow and got in the way because he got mad, yelled, and threw the remote control and hit me in the side of the head and eye. It was terrible. I was bleeding and bruised. My mom had finally had enough and left him with me and my brother. We went to my grandparents' house. They took pictures of my eye and called the police, but they wouldn't do anything. Social services investigated, but they didn't do anything either. We were happy at my grandparents' and safe. But Joe was very slick. He called my mom and said the right words, and after a while talked her into coming back with promises to be better. He actually was for a while, but then he went back to his old ways. He even tried to beat my brother. I took a lot of beatings for him because I love him and wanted to protect him. It all came crashing down one December night when I was 9. My mom had forgotten to pay the phone bill, and the phone got turned off. She was at work, working a double second and third shifts, and Joe was due to go into the same plant for his third shift in a different department. He was enraged when he found out the phone was off. He drug me out of bed, and we drove up the store just up the road from our house. He called my mom at work on the pay phone. He was yelling and cussing at her about the phone bill. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. He told her if she didn't get home in an hour, he would beat me. I was terrified. We went back to the house, and I went to my room. Joe kept ranting and raving. I was so scared. He called me into the living room and attacked me. He was beating me with a belt all over. He grabbed me and threw me into a wall. He pulled the chin cabinet down on top of me. He grabbed a broom and continued to beat me. The beating kept up on and off. For several hours I was in pain and covered in bruises and blood. It was time for him to go to work. He got dressed to go and told me that if I went to school in the morning, he would beat me when I got home. I guess he knew, with all my wounds, the school would do something. I was scared, but I needed help. I couldn't change out of my pajamas because I hurt too much. I slowly limped my way to my bus stop barefoot. And still, in my incredible Hulk pajamas, the bus driver pulled up open the door, took one look at me, and got me on the bus, and immediately drove to school. Then everything moved so fast. Before I knew it, I was talking to social services and the police. They ended up taking me to my grandparents, who got custody of me. I was happy to be with my grandparents, whom I love, and happy to be safe. But I missed my mom and my brother. Strangely enough, the police never did anything to my stepfather. It was a different time, I guess. It was a few more years before my mom got the courage and left him. But she finally did. She ended up meeting a high school sweetheart and getting remarried. She and my brother finally had a happy life like I did. And we were back in each other's life. I found out later that my stepfather had been orphaned at the young age of 5 when his parents and older sister died, when his dad's small plane crashed. He was then raised by a very physically and mentally abusive aunt and uncle. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it explains it. I eventually ran into him on social media. I forgave him and let go of the anger and hurt I had been holding on to. He had gotten a lot of mental help and seemed to be doing good. I convinced my brother to talk to him because Joe was his biological dad, and Joe had found his mom's family and extended members of his dad's family, whom he lost touch with when his parents died. I told my brother that it would be good for him to meet some of his family from his father's side, as he had never met them. I don't know my dad at all, and would have loved to have that connection, as Joe continued to change and work hard to be better. I, strangely enough, became his biggest cheerleader. He would come to me for advice, or to get me to mediate between he and my brother if they bumped heads, as their relationship tended to be rocky. My brother is like my mom. He holds on to grudges a long time. I don't know who I am like being willing to forgive and forget. I know some of you will think I am crazy for forgiving him and actually helping him, but it really brought me an inner peace. And also I took pity on him for what he had been through as a child. That kind of trauma could turn anyone into a monster, which is why I went to lots of therapy to help me get over mine. Story 2. Beep, the following document was collected as part of the evidence in the cold case of the Abby Fletcher disappearance. Abby disappeared in the fall of 2002. The theory is that she was abducted while riding her bike on the evening of October 19th, 2002. The bike was discovered the next morning in a roadside ditch. After years of false leads, detectives discovered her live journal from the weeks leading up to her disappearance. If you know anything, please contact the private detective unit, New Jersey State Police Beep and X200B and X200B. Beep, September 3rd, 2002. Beep, hello world. Quick question. Why does no one love me? Okay, I know people love me. I have parents and friends who love me, but I mean like real love. Like move over on the plywood. I am getting on there, Rose love. I mean, I think I am pretty. A boy called me cute once. Does that count? Maybe I could date him. Actually, no. He picked his nose and stashed the boogers under his desk. You can do better, Abby. Anyway, live journal. If anyone out there wants to date a low-maintenance, cute, buy you flowers kinda girl, let me know. I am single and ready to mingle. Beep, September 10th, 2002. Beep, no news on the love front. A few creepy messages. It's like, you probably 40 dude. Don T, you have a wife or something. So, I am still a loveless loser. But in happier news, I started a job. I am now a beep waitress in training beep at the Burger Hut Up on Route 31 for those that Haven Tea Bin. Just imagine a Burger King with worse French fries. Maybe a tall, handsome chef will swoop me off of my feet there. ILL let you know. Beep, September 24th, 2002. Beep, I met a guy. Not like that. I made a friend at work. How does one describe him? He definitely interesting. He tall, kind of beep, and always has sweat stains in weird places. So he weird. But also I think he maybe the smartest person I ever met. Or maybe he an idiot. I don't know. He makes the staff call him the professor. Most people don't, but I do. I mean, maybe he is like a Goodwill Hunting type genius who is so smart that the only job his brain can handle is flipping burgers. Maybe. In other news, I smoked a cigarette for the first time. EWWWW. How do people smoke a pack a day? Like, I thought I was gonna cough up a lung. My tongue was like sandpaper for the rest of my shift. Mom, Dad, if you ever read this, I am sorry. I know you always warn me about cigarettes, but the professor was so persistent. Besides, he told me the stuff we hear about cigarettes is all just beer company propaganda. A battle of the vices. So, I gave in and smoked with him. Beep, October 4th, 2002. Beep, dear world. How do you break up with someone you aren't even dating? The professor keeps following me. Not like beep, I am going to beep you following beep. But like outside the work bathroom after I beep. Standing near my car after work. Walking up behind me and pinching my sides. Making me eat his bizarre burger combinations. Yes, nice, you know. But like too much. I don't know. I don't want to upset him. He seems like the kind of person with a short temper. Like the kind of person who gets into road rage fist fights. Does that make sense? At the end of my shift today, he asked me if I wanted to go out sometime. I said no. I blamed my parents. They don't let me date. Then I did something beep. He asked me what my parents were like. I said they grew up poor, and now are super protective over what they have, including me. Then he said you must have a nice house, and I said yeah. And he asked, is it in Stanton Ridge? And I said no, not that rich, more like Deer Park Manor. And he said Deer Park Manor, and didn't he say anything? He probably could have looked me up anyway, right? They're S-like, yellow pages and stuff. My parents are gonna beep me if he tries to come over. Beep, beep Abby. I feel sick. Beep October 10th, 2002. Beep, I think I am paranoid. Like, losing my mind paranoid. Ugh. I hate this. I keep watching the cars outside. They're S1. That really creeps me out. It's the same car the professor drives. And it's parked across from our house. And on top of that, you want to know something else, Beep? We're rereading Romeo and Juliet in class right now. Tell me that not the most beep-up love story ever. Beep what light through yonder window breaks. It is the east, and Juliet is the sun, and none but fools do wear it, cast it off. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Beep, it is my love. Watching you through your bedroom window. That is love. Like, why do we teach young girls that love is stalking? I am not in love, but I am in my room with the lights off, staring at parked cars and thinking, wow, maybe my true love is stalking me, and that must mean he loves me. I know I am just paranoid. Tons of people drive that kind of car. I just need to calm down. Beep. October 18th, 2002. Beep, I haven't been on the same shift as the professor in a while. Maybe he quit. Beep, that would be the greatest thing ever. If he quit, then I definitely believe in Beep. In other news, no other takers on the love front. In fact, I think I am going to take a break from it for a while. Love is just like too intense. I thought I wanted it. Everyone Beep thinks Beep they want it, right? But really, I don't. I just want to be myself for a while. Anyway, I got to head to work now. Mom is working late, so I am going to bike there. At least it's pretty warm out today. And #X200B Beep. On October 18th, 2012. This account was removed due to inactivity. Beep. For more on the Abby Fletcher disappearance. Story 3. The keeper of Crying Rock, the lighthouse, stood alone on Crying Rock Island. A jagged fist of granite punching up through the frigid Atlantic. Mariners called its beacon. The Widow S wink 2 quick pulses every 30 seconds. Like a woman blinking back tears. Clara had found the posting online 3 weeks after identifying her brother S' waterlogged body. Caretaker needed for historic lighthouse. 6-month winter term. Total solitude required. The helicopter pilot refused to land. Tide S wrong. He shouted over rotor wash, dumping her supplies on the helipad like he was offloading contraband. Storm coming. You sure about this? Clara watched the chopper shrink into the steel wool sky. The whump-whump of its blades, replaced by the hiss of waves, chewing the cliffs below. Salt crusted her lips. The December cold had teeth. Days passed in metronomic routine. Dawn. Check the diesel generators. Noon. Log weather readings onto yellowed parchment sheets. Dusk. Climb 214 spiral steps to clean the Fresnel lens. Its prisms sharp as dragon scales. Nights were worst. The beacon S rotations sliced through her cabin S lone window every half-minute, painting the walls with fleeting anatomies, a rib cage here, a spinal column there, before plunging her back into blackness. She stopped sleeping, not for fear, though the isolation did things to time. The walls grew porous. Wind became voices. Once, hauling water from the cistern, she heard a child S laughter skitter across the rocks. When she turned, something pale slithered into a crevice. Stress, Clara told the ration tins. Her voice startled her. You were hearing things. The storm hit on the solstice. 70-knot winds screamed through the lighthouse tower, making the entire structure hum like a plucked cello string. Clara crouched in the supply closet, hands pressed to the vibrating walls. When she felt it, a wet tap, tap, tap against her palm. She yanked her hand back. A dark blotch seeped through the whitewash. Not water. Something thicker, warmer, reeking of low tide and copper. The stain spread faster than physics allowed, tendrils branching like capillaries, until the wall resembled lung tissue. Then it blinked. Clara took to carrying the fire axe. The generators failed on Christmas Eve. She found their fuel lines clogged with strands of kelp that squirmed when touched. The backup batteries lasted 16 hours. Darkness changed the lighthouse. Without the beacon S sweeping eye, the tower became a vertical coffin. Clara huddled in the lantern room, hurricane lamp between her knees, watching storm surges hurl themselves against the cliffs. Her radio crackled with dead air. The axe handle grew slick in her grip. Midnight. A new sound under the wind S howl. A wet, rhythmic thud from the stairwell. Climb, climb, climb. She aimed the lamp beam down the spiral stairs. Shadows writhed on the curved walls. Too many limbs. Heads lolling on broken necks. The thudding resolved into footsteps. Something was coming up. Who else there? The wind stole her words. The footsteps paused. Then climb, climb, climb. Faster now. Clara swung the axe at the first thing that breached the stairs. the blade bit deep into. Nothing. The footsteps passed through her like an X-ray, cold and buzzing. Behind her, the Fresnel lens began turning despite the dead motors, prisms smearing the lamplight into a sickly green glow. In that light, she saw them, figures etched into the walls, not carved, but grown, their outlines formed by black mold and corroded iron, a man clawing at his eyes, a woman curled fetal around a dark stain, a child with too many joints in its fingers, and newest, freshest, still glistening. Clara's own face, mouth stretched wide around a silent scream. The lens stopped. The green light pooled on the floor. Illuminating words scratched into the brass plating. They come in with the tide. They never leave dawn, brought brittle sunlight. Clara rationed her last protein bar, fingers trembling. The storm had scoured the helipad clean. No supplies remained, except a crate of rusted salt cod from the 1940s. She tried fishing off the rocks, but the lines came up weighted with things that made her retch knotted hair. A sodden wedding dress, a child S leather shoe filled with periwinkles. The lens room called to her. She found the changes at twilight. Fresh names carved into the lens, housing Abner Wicks. 1923, Margaret Vi. 1947, Elias Crane. 1991 and below, in oozing rust. Clara Young. 2023, the brass felt fever-warm. When she pressed her palm to it, the entire lighthouse moaned. That night, the tapping began inside her skull. Let us in, it whispered with her brother S voice. You let me drown. She stuffed wax in her ears. The taps became blows. Something hammering at the base of her skull. Her reflection in the lens, warped eyes sinking. Hair whitening. Skin modeling like old cheesecloth. The axe blade no longer bit the walls. The lighthouse was healing itself, sealing her in. On New Year's Eve, Clara broke into the forbidden cellar. The previous keepers had sealed it with riveted steel. She spent 6 hours peeling it open with a crowbar. The smell knocked her sideways, rot and iodine, and the sweet reek of insulin decay. By lantern light, she saw the walls were not walls, but bodies, dozens of them, fused together in a honeycomb of desiccated flesh, their arms interlaced like roots, their mouths gaped in unison, each throat packed with damp sand. At the center hung a membrane, pulsing, translucent, a living sac the size of a coffin, veined with phosphorescent algae. Inside floated a humanoid shape, its features blurred, as if seen through old glass. Clara's lantern dimmed. The sac quivered. A hand pressed from within. 5 fingers clearly defined. Her brother S hand, down to the scar from the bike accident when they were 8. Clara gurgled the walls. She ran. The lighthouse shuddered around her, stairs melting into ramps, hatches sealing, the thing in the cellar, unfolded, wet sounds echoing up the tower shaft. When she reached the lantern room, the sky was wrong, a bruised violet, the moon a cataract eye. Below, the ocean had retreated. Miles of seabed lay exposed, littered with shipwrecks and crumbling foundations. Crying Rock Island wasn't an island at all, but the tip of something larger, something waiting. The sack burst. They found her journal washed ashore in Maine. The last entry. The light docently warns ships away. It calls them. The rocks aren't natural. They grow. Every wreck, every drowned soul makes it bigger. The lighthouse isn't a building it a throat. The lens is an eye. I can feel it swallowing me downward into the warm places where the old things dream. They be so hungry. They've been alone so long. I think I'll take down the light. Let the next storm hide us. Let the ships come close. Let them, the Coast Guard, investigated. No trace of Clara remained except a single work glove, crusted with barnacles that still twitched when pried open. The lighthouse stood empty until March, when a new caretaker arrived, a retired teacher, seeking solitude after his wife's passing. On his first night, he swears he heard laughter in the cistern, 2 quick pulses, like a woman blinking back tears. Story 4. The house breathed. Clara noticed it on her 3rd night, standing in the kitchen with a chipped mug of chamomile trembling in her hands. The floorboards beneath her bare feet pulsed like a rib cage, each creak syncopated with the wet rasp coming from the walls. She told herself it was the wind combing through the old farmhouse's rotting bones, the same way she dismissed the faint laughter behind the pantry door, and the shadow that kept perfect pace with her own. She chosen the isolation deliberately. After the divorce, the silence of her Brooklyn apartment had grown teeth, but the realtor hadn't mentioned the previous owners. Hadn't warned her about the Bentleys, all 7 of them, who vanished over the course of a damp October in 1983, leaving behind half-eaten meals, and clocks stopped at 3:07 a.m. The police report, which Clara only found after discovering the moldering box in the attic, noted peculiar details. Teeth marks on the baseboards, a child's fingernails embedded in the hallway's wainscoting, and everywhere, that smell of turned earth and spoiled milk. The first real incident happened while she was tuning the piano. It had arrived that morning, the one sentimental relic she fought to keep a Steinway upright, with ivory keys, the color of old bones. Her fingers found middle C, and the note quivered in the still air. From the cellar, directly below, came a perfect echo. Then another note, this one a half step lower. A duet. Hello, Clara called, voice slicing through the dust motes, swirling in the late afternoon light. Her reflection in the piano, lacquered surface, rippled, as if something stood behind her, breathing. The response came not from the cellar, but from inside the walls, a wet, clicking cadence that made her think of a beetle-s mandibles. It formed words. You relate. She fled to the overgrown garden, where the September sun did nothing to warm her. That where Mrs. Harlow found her, the closest neighbor, 3 miles down the cracked country road, standing at the rusted gate with a jar of blackberry jam and eyes like pooled ink. They told you about the sound, didn't they? The old woman's voice was a dry rattle, matching the dead cornstalks clattering in the breeze. When Clara shook her head, Mrs. Harlow set the jam on the stone wall and began unbuttoning her left sleeve. Your piano, his favorite way to hunt. The revealed flesh was a mosaic of scars, some thin and white as thread, others glossy and puckered. Between them, words carved in ragged script. Don T answer, Don T answer, Don T. He gets in through the quiet places, Mrs. Harlow whispered, buttoning her sleeve with trembling fingers. The hollows, under the bed, behind the shower curtain, inside your head, when you be staring at the ceiling at 3 and wondering if you've ever truly been loved. Her cracked lips peeled back from nicotine-stained teeth. My grandmother called him the hollow man, fed him her youngest son to save the rest of us. Still comes collecting, though. Interest, I suppose. Clara laughed. It came out shrill, unspooling at the edges. This is a joke, right? Some rural hazing ritual for city idiots who buy murder houses. The old woman's smile vanished. She grabbed Clara's wrist, fingernails biting crescent moons into her flesh. Check your walls. Between the stones, in the basement. You'll find them the teeth. He always leaves teeth. That night, the piano began playing itself. Clara watched from the hallway, back pressed against flocked wallpaper that peeled like sunburned skin, the keys depressed in pairs, never single notes, as though played by something with too many fingers. A lullaby emerged, one her mother used to sing, but corrupted, minor where it should be major, a discordant seventh slithering beneath the melody. The glass in the hallway mirror fogged. Through the condensation, Clara saw them. Shadows congealing into shapes behind her, tall, emaciated, heads cocked at impossible angles as they swayed to the music. She ran upstairs, but the bedroom door wouldn't close. An invisible force held it open 6 inches the exact width of a human face. From the darkness beyond came a sound, like a corpse breathing through a punctured lung. Clara spent the night in her car, engine running, staring at the house as its windows pulsed like a slow-blinking eye. The foundation stones came apart like rotten teeth in the cellar S choking dark. Clara S' flashlight beam trembled across mortar dust, and the glint of something ivory, she pried it free a molar, still streaked with root fragments, then another and another, dozens wedged between the stones, some tiny and milk-white, a child S, others mottled with age. The smell of decay thickened, coating her tongue. Something brushed her neck, cold, clammy, deliberate. She spun, flashlight scattering wild shadows. The beam caught a flash of movement a hand, too long and jointed wrong, withdrawing into a crack in the western wall. The stones there wept a viscous black fluid. Clara stumbled back, crushing a mushroom that released a spore cloud tasting of copper and forgotten birthdays. Upstairs, the piano crashed through 3 octaves in a dissonant scream. The dreams started in earnest then. Clara would wake paralyzed. The bedroom air gelatinous and reeking of wet fur. Shapes pressed down on her chest not shadows, but the absence of light, cold and hungry. Whispers seeped from the walls, stitching themselves into her thoughts until she couldn't distinguish memory from invasion. You let him leave because you wanted to suffer, because you think you deserve the hollow places. Your mother S. last thought wasn't of you. It was relief. We can taste your loneliness. It is delicious. Mrs. Harlow stopped answering her calls when Clara drove to the woman S. farmhouse. She found the windows boarded, the door sealed with a cross fashioned from railroad spikes. A fresh scar bisected the porch deep grooves, as though something heavy had been dragged into the woods. The revelation came at 3:07 a.m. Clara woke to the bed shaking, the headboard drumming a death march against the wall. The hollow man stood at the foot of the bed, his form flickering between solid and smoke. Ribs protruded like a shipwreck S hull. His face, if it could be called a face, was a shifting collage of features stolen from old nightmares. Her father S. disapproving scowl, her ex-husband S. cold eyes, the gaping mouth of her stillborn daughter. A loss she'd never spoken aloud. You invited me in. It hissed, voice a chorus of grave songs. Every time you bled into the silence. Every midnight you wished for an end. You built me a banquet. Clara S. mouth filled with the taste of soil and rust. She tried to scream, but her breath became a swarm of centipedes skittering back down her throat. The hollow man leaned closer, his breath freezing the tears on her cheeks. Let me show you your truest hollow. the vision struck like a cleaver. A childhood closet, her tiny hands scrabbling at the door as her brother S. laughter faded down the hall the divorce papers, her pen hovering as something dark, and eager uncurled in her chest the Farmhouse S. previous family, the Bentleys. She knew them now, watching in mute horror as their youngest boy opened the cellar door to something that had been whispering to him for weeks and deeper, older. A stone-lined pit in the woods, filled with bones wearing gold rings and iron shackles. The first Harlow, face streaming with tears, dropping a wailing infant into the darkness. Take him and be satisfied. A chorus of wet clicks answered, the pact sealed in blood and betrayal. Clara vomited teeth. They clattered onto the floorboards, pearly shards, still slick with blood and nerve endings. The hollow man S. laughter followed her as she crawled downstairs. The house itself contracting around her like a great lung. In the cellar, the western wall had split open, revealing a tunnel lined with grasping hands. Their palms bore her own fingerprints, the truth coiled inside her, venomous. It wasn't the house. It was never the house. The hollow places had been inside her all along, the abandoned rooms of her heart, where hope went to die. The hollow man was just the first creature sharp enough to smell the rot. Something moved in the tunnel, not the hollow man, but a figure so familiar it stopped her breath. A woman with Clara S. face, but softer, younger, untouched by loss. Her mirror self reached out, eyes pleading. Don T, let him in, she begged. Don T, become what they made you. The hands dragged Mirror Clara back into the dark. Her scream became the piano S final, discordant note. Now Clara sits at the Steinway, fingers poised above ivory keys. The walls hum with anticipation. In the cellar, the tunnel exhales a promise. Come home, come home. Come, she begins to play. Downstairs, the foundation stones bleed. Upstairs, the bedroom door creaks open 6 inches, and deep in the woods, Mrs. Harlow kneels before a stone pit, dropping in a jar of blackberry jam, as fresh screams rise like steam from the farmhouse S chimney. The hollow man feasts tonight, but tomorrow, oh, Clara, can't you hear the floorboards singing? They've learned your name. Story 5. The first thing Clara noticed about the old house was the smell of wet soil, not the earthy freshness of turned garden beds, but the cloying dampness of turned graves. It clung to her wool coat as she fumbled with the rusted key, her breath pluming in the November air. The realtor had called it a fix-rubber with character. Clara called it the last inheritance from a mother who stopped speaking to her 7 years before the cancer took hold. Needs some love, said Ben, her brother, kicking at the porch step. Splinters rained into the dead hydrangea bushes below. His voice carried that false cheer he'd worn since identifying their Mother S body. A plastic smile stretched over something jagged. Clara wondered if her own face looked that way now. The foyer swallowed them whole. Dust motes swam in the thin light from boarded windows, settling on floral wallpaper that bled yellow at the seams. Clara S. boot sank into the carpet, not damp, soft, like walking on a tongue. Christ, Ben muttered, peeling back a strip of wallpaper. Beneath it, the plaster wall bore deep grooves, 4 parallel lines, running floor to ceiling. Raccoons. Clara touched the marks. Her fingertips came away, glittering with something that wasn't tea plaster. Maybe they found the photographs in the attic, not in some hidden compartment or locked trunk, but spread across the floorboards in a fan pattern, facing the single dust-caked window. Polaroids from the 80s, their colors leached to poison greens and jaundiced yellows. Clara recognized her mother standing before the house, younger than Clara was now, wearing a sundress the color of a fresh bruise. In every shot, her left hand clutched the shoulder of a child Clara. Didn't he recognize a girl with white blonde hair and eyes like oil spills? Who's that? Ben asked, holding a photo to the light. The girl S face blurred as if moving, though the rest of the image remained crisp. Some neighbor kid. Clara S throat tightened. The girl S fingers, she noticed, were too long, joints stacked like a spider S legs. They heard the first knock that night. 3 precise raps against Clara S bedroom door as she lay staring at the water-stained ceiling. Ben S snores rumbled through the wall from the guest room. Ben. The floorboards creaked as she sat up. This isn't funny. The hallway yawned empty. Cold pooled around her ankles. From the corner of her eye, Clara caught movement in the bathroom mirror, a pale smudge darting behind her reflection. When she turned, nothing stared back but the dark mouth of the shower curtain. The mold appeared the next morning, black tendrils spreading across the kitchen, sealing like veins. Ben laughed when Clara pointed them out, until he looked up. Was that there yesterday? His coffee steamed between them. They both watched the largest patch pulse softly, rhythmically. In time, with Clara S. suddenly rabbit quick, Pulse the contractor refused to enter the basement. Mr. Donovan, his name tag read, though his hands shook too badly to hold a business card. ULL want to seal it up, he said, backing toward his truck. Some things ain't meant to be dug up. Clara waited until Ben left for supplies. The basement door opened with a sigh, releasing air that tasted of copper and spoiled milk. Her flashlight beam trembled over concrete walls scarred with those same 4-clawed grooves. In the center of the room stood a chair, not antique, not charming, a kitchen chair from the 90s. Its vinyl seat split like overripe fruit. Dark stains webbed outward from its legs. Clara S. light caught something glinting beneath shards of amber glass. A broken picture frame. The photo inside showed the blonde girl. This time, Clara recognized the wallpaper, the chair, the rope burns on small wrists. Mother stood at the edge of the frame. Smiling the knocks came nightly now, sometimes at the doors, sometimes inside the walls. Ben started wearing a knife on his belt. The old hunting blade their father left behind. He'd taken to sleeping on the couch, facing the basement door. "You need to eat," Clara told him one morning. He'd lost the hollows under his eyes. They'd gone smooth and full as grapes. Dawn tea, you hear it. He stirred his coffee counterclockwise, around and around, the scratching, like it S trying to get in. Or out that afternoon, Clara found the journal wedged behind a heating vent in the master bedroom. Her mother S tight cursive filled the pages. Entries stopping abruptly in 1993, the year Clara turned 4, the year before Ben was born, April 17th. The binding requires fresh blood monthly. Mrs. Donovan says this is normal. She showed me how to make the marks on the walls to keep it contained. June 2nd. It asked for a name today. I told it no. You don't get to have her. September 14th. I want to do it. Let the town starve. Let their children waste. I want to give it mine. The final entry, October 31st, smeared with something rusty. It S learned to wear their faces. Clara was still trembling when the screams began. Not Ben S. A child S voice, high and distorted, coming from the basement. She ran, clutching the journal like a talisman, nearly tripping over the knife at the foot of the stairs. Ben S. knife. Clean the basement door stood open. Ben stood before the chair, his back to her. The blonde girl perched on his shoulders, her elongated fingers buried in his hair. Clara choked on the smell of wet soil and rotting citrus. Ben. He turned. His eyes were perfect mirrors, reflecting Clara S. face back at her in funhouse proportions. The girl S. head rotated slowly, bones popping like bubble wrap, her mouth unhinged. You let me starve, she said with Ben S. voice, with Clara S. voice, with the rasp of their mother S. final breaths. The journal fell open to a Polaroid tucked between pages. Clara at age 3, grinning on their mother S. lap. Behind them, the blonde girl pressed a finger to lips that split at the corners. In the margins, their mother S. frantic scrawl. It takes a sister for a sister. The first cut didn't he hurt? Clara realized, dimly, she was holding Ben.'s knife, the blade drawing crimson lines down her forearm. The girl's head snapped toward the blood. Ben.'s body crumpled. Clara, the thing crawled toward her, joints bending backward. You always wanted to be an only child, she woke to paramedics, prying the knife from her hand. Ben.'s body lay nearby, cold and curiously deflated. The police asked about the marks on the basement walls, the empty chair, the clumps of white blonde hair in the drain. Didn't he ask about the journal pages burning in the sink? Didn't he notice the fresh claw marks under the wallpaper? Clara watched the house shrink in the ambulance window, her bandaged arm throbbing in time with her heartbeat that night in the hospital. She heard 3 knocks. The nurse found her screaming at a wall of mirrors, all reflecting a blonde girl mouthing words that left frost blooms on the glass. Hungry. The new owners call it a charming fixer-upper. They don't mind the claw marks adds character. They say their twin daughters adore the spacious attic. Sometimes, when the streetlights flicker, neighbors glimpse a woman in a rotting wool coat standing across the road. They whisper about the way she stares at the girl's bedroom window, face glistening with tears or rain or something darker. They never notice the small handprints blooming like mold on the basement walls, never hear the wet click of something turning the doorknob, testing the locks, learning, waiting for the blood to sour, for the binding to break, for sisters to be sisters. Story 6. The soil of Blackmire Hollow never quite forgets where the blood falls. Ellie Mercer discovered this on the morning she arrived, when the rental car's tires sank into the mudflats where Main Street should have been. Through the September drizzle, the village clung to the mountainside like lichen on a corpse, sagging clapboard houses, a boarded-up church, the skeletal remains of a general store, still bearing the sun-bleached sign her great-grandfather painted in 1923. Her mother's final voicemail played in her head, static cutting through the words, "Come home, Ellie Bird," before the veil finishes hollowing. The first warning came at the inn. Mrs. Pevensy's knuckles turned bone-white around her teacup when Ellie mentioned clearing out the Mercer family plot. No sense digging up what's settled, the old woman muttered, staring at the moth-eaten tapestry behind Ellie's head. It depicted 7 women hanging from a lightning-struck oak, their skirts blooming into roots. We've still got 3 days till equinox, time enough to lay flowers and be gone. That night, Ellie dreamt of hands pressing up against her bedroom floorboards, not pushing through, testing the wood, like something beneath the foundation was checking for weak spots. She woke to find her suitcase appended. Every black garment she packed for the funeral, arranged in a starfish pattern around her sleeping bag. The air smelled of turned earth and funeral lilies. The cemetery caretaker found her at noon, scrubbing grave moss from the Mercer headstones. His left eye wandered independently of the right as he watched her peel back layers of rotted oak leaves. "They be wanting their tithe," he said, tossing a rusted iron key at her feet. "Your ma was the last proper keeper. Best check the root cellar 'fore dark." The key fit the storm cellar behind the Mercer homestead. Ellie's flashlight beam caught the jar's first dozens lining rough-hewn shelves, filled with dark liquid and floating things that made her gag. Behind them, carved into the stone wall, a family tree stretched back to 1692, names blotted out with tar, strange symbols scratched beneath each erasure. At the bottom, her mother's name, Marion Mercer, 1968 to 2023. Below it, her own. A cold breath stirred the cobwebs. Ellie turned to find the caretaker blocking the stairs. Every 50 years, the hollow needs new roots to hold back the crawling dark, he said, yellow teeth glinting. Your ma tried to cheat the pact when she fled pregnant with you. Now the veil worn thin as a widow's nightgown. He nodded at the jars. 7 generations of Mercer women, paid in blood and bone, to keep that thing sleeping. You need to finish the work. The equinox bonfire reeked of burning hair. Ellie stood at the tree line, watching villagers toss wreaths of nightshade into the flames. Mrs. Pevensey chanted in a language that crackled like fat in the fire. Shadows began pooling at the base of the lightning oak, not cast by the flames, but drinking the light, thickening into something muscular and deliberate. The caretaker's scream cut through the chanting. He thrashed against invisible bonds at the forest's edge, his wandering eye finally focusing in terror as the ground beneath him softened. Ellie's boots sank into suddenly marshy earth as she ran toward him. Too late. His body folded into the mud like a letter slipped under a door. The wet smack of closing soil echoing like a butcher's slap. In the root cellar, Ellie traced the symbols beneath her blotted out ancestors. Protection sigils, half finished. Binding rituals, missing their final strokes. Her mother's journal surfaced in an old trunk. Entries devolving from grocery lists to frantic scribbles. It wants a daughter's blood to break the cycle. Salt the doors. Keep the candles burning. Dawn tea. Let it take you the storm hit at dusk. Hailstones cracked against the homestead like thrown teeth. Ellie barricaded herself in the kitchen. The caretaker's words looping in her head. 7 generations, blood and bone. Through the rattling shutters, she saw them coming shapes, neither human nor animal loping across the overgrown fields, their bodies warping like wax, held to flame. The first breach came through the chimney, fingers longer than human, blackened as if charred, scrabbled at the flue. Ellie threw salt and lit matches, choking on the stench of burning keratin, when the wailing began a sound between a dying calf and a woman in labor. She fled to the root cellar. Jars shattered as the house groaned above her. Thick liquid oozed between floorboards. Hissing where it touched the salt lines Ellie had drawn in the trembling beam of her dying flashlight. The family tree carving began to bleed. Tar-like droplets welled from the blotted names, forming words on the stone floor. No more keepers, no more peace. At midnight, the storm died. Ellie emerged to a village, drowned in perfect silence. No crickets, no wind. The bonfire ashes formed a perfect spiral, leading to the lightning oak. There in the knotted hollow, where 7 nooses still swayed, something waited, wearing misses. Pevensey S. face. Should V planted yourself when the ground was soft. It said through the old woman S. slack mouth. The voice buzzed with the vibration of 1,000 flies trapped behind flesh. Now we'll have to open you up the hard way. Ellie ran, not toward the mud-clogged road, but into the choked forest, where even moonlight feared to linger. The thing pursuing her didn't he bother with footsteps. The very trees bent away from its passage. Sap bleeding black where bark grazed its form. She fell into a creek bed choked with animal bones. The caretaker's wandering eye staring up from a nest of rib fragments. Dawn found her at the family mausoleum. Her mother's casket lay pried open, empty save for a single photograph. Ellie at age 6, midlaugh, with dark vines already creeping through the Polaroid's edges. The dates on the stone told the truth. Her mother had hidden Marion Mercer died not last week, but on the autumn equinox, 20 years prior, the day she'd supposedly taken her daughter, and fled. The first tendril brushed Ellie's ankle as she pieced it together. Not tendril root, emerging from the mausoleum floor. Dozens more followed, glistening and warm as living tissue. They coiled around her legs with terrifying gentleness, tiny thorns pricking her skin to draw ruby beads. Above, through crumbling mortar, the thing wearing misses. Pevensey's skin watched with eyes like smoked glass. Good soil here. It crooned as roots breached Ellie's veins, deep enough to grow something lasting. The villagers found her at noon, or what they pretended was her standing waist deep in the Mercer plot, hands full of rich black earth, smiling with teeth grown slightly too sharp. She recited the old prayers flawlessly, distributed jars of dark honey that made arthritic joints limber and dying crops flourish, when children began sleepwalking to the lightning oak. Their parents praised the Mercer girl for rebuilding the hollow S prosperity, but in the root cellar, beneath 7 generations of blotted names, the true work continues. The thing that wears LES skin carves new symbols into weeping stone. It hums lullabies to the jars as their contents pulse in time with the equinox tides, and in the deepest part of the forest, where the mud never dries, fresh graves stir with the promise of another 50 years' peace. The price has been paid. The cycle continues. For now. Story 7. The walls exhaled when Clara moved in, musty breath of aged plaster and secrets. The old Victorian house on Hemlock Creek Road shuddered as she dragged her suitcase across the threshold, her grandmother's death certificate still warm in her purse, the ink on the deed still damp. The inheritance came with 3 conditions. Never open the east-facing window. Never answer the door after sunset. Never, under any circumstances, go down to the root. Celershi broke the first rule. That evening July heat pressed against the leaded glass like a hungry animal. Clara's fingers left damp prints on the peeling windowsill as she shoved upward. The window gave with a wet crack, releasing a scent that made her teeth ache overripe blackberries, and something metallic beneath. Moonlight spilled across floorboards that gleamed like old bones that when she heard the first whisper, "You shouldn't have done that." It sighed from the corner where her shadow should have been, but her shadow remained pinned beneath the standing lamp. Trembling Clara spent the next week cataloging the house's oddities, the way her reflection in the hall mirror sometimes opened its mouth too wide when she brushed her teeth, the cold spot on the staircase that clung to her skin like congealed broth, the faint sobbing that seeped through the walls every night at 3:17 a.m., precisely 2 minutes after the antique grandfather clock in the parlor choked out its broken rendition of Westminster chimes on the 8th day. She found the photographs they hid beneath a loose floorboard in what had been Gran's bedroom, sepia-toned images of women with Clara's chin, Clara's widow's peak, Clara's almond-shaped eyes, all posed before the same massive yew tree that still grew behind the house, all with their left hands missing. Family resemblance, Clara muttered, thumb smoothing over the 1893 portrait of Great-Aunt Lenora, her reflection in the dust-streaked mirror across the room. Didn't he move? Its lips, the whispers, grew louder. They took on texture, the rasp of a whetstone across steel, the wet click of an unhinged jaw. Clara started wearing noise-canceling headphones, but the voices simply migrated to her dreams. In them, she walked through endless corridors lined with jars of floating teeth, while something heavy and warm breathed down the back of her neck on the summer solstice. The house presented its first gift. Clara woke to find her pillowcase embroidered with crude crimson. Stitches a Child S rendition of the yew tree. Roots coiled around stick figures. The metallic scent from the window clung to the threads when she tried to burn it in the kitchen sink. The flames turned an unnatural green and sang in shrill harmony with the tea kettle S. Whistle the second rule, broke itself 3 sharp knocks, shook the front door at 11:47 p.m. Clara S. fingers froze on her laptop keyboard. The glow of genealogy forums bleaching her face blue. The security chain she de-installed after finding the photographs hung limp, already unfastened. Delivery for Miss Clara Bishop. A voice like radio static filtered through the wood. Her grandmother S. voiced the peephole showed only darkness. When she opened the door, she didn't mean to. Her hands moved on their own. The porch light revealed a wicker bassinet, crawling with fat black crickets. Inside lay a doll with button eyes, and a dress made from what Clara recognized as the fabric of her childhood security blanket. Its left hand ended in raw stitching that night. The grandfather clock struck 13 times by August. Clara stopped sleeping. The house fed on her exhaustion, its angles growing sharper, shadows pooling thicker in corners where the light couldn't quite reach. She found strange hairs in her hairbrush coarse and white. Though she been brunette since college, her reflection developed a lag. Movements trailing half a second behind, like a poorly synced video the root cellar called to her its iron-bound door, appeared overnight in the kitchen floor. Crusted with rust that flaked away like dried blood. The padlock bore the Bishop family crest. Clara S. hands shook as she inserted the key from Gran S. safety deposit box. The mechanism turned with a scream of protesting metal-cold air, rushed up to meet her, not the earthy chill of a basement, but the sterile freeze of a morgue drawer. The wooden steps groaned underfoot, each creak perfectly synchronized with cracks from the yew tree outside. At the bottom, her phone S flashlight revealed jars lining rough stone shelves. Not preserves. Fingers, dozens of them, floating in amber liquid. All left hands severed cleanly at the wrist. The final jar stood empty, label fresh. Clara Marie Bishop, June 21, 1993, blank her birth date. Today, S date the shelves began to bleed. Not blood, thick, sap-like resin that smelled of yew berries and funeral lilies. It crawled across the floor in sentient rivulets, herding Clara toward the far wall, where something pulsed in the shadows. A heart, massive and veined, suspended in a web of roots that burrowed through the cellar walls. With each labored thump, photographs materialized in the air, Clara, as a child blowing out birthday candles. Clara sleeping in her dorm room. Clara weeping at Gran S' funeral, all watched by a figure made of shadows and moth wings. You've been hungry. The heart croaked in Gran S' voice. All those years dieting, counting calories, never understanding why you kept withering. But we know, Don Tiwi. Clara S' left hand spasmed. She looked down to see the skin translucent, bones glowing faintly blue, the same blue as the veins in the suspended heart. The bishops never die. The walls intoned as roots snaked around her ankles. We relocate. Memories that guarantee hers flooded Clara S' mind great-aunt Lenora, screaming, as her hand petrified into gnarled wood, Gran in 1972, weeping as she sawed through her own wrist with pruning shears, a line of women stretching back centuries, offering their dominant hands to feed the ravenous dark. Beneath their home the roots reached her elbow. Clara understood now why the house had wanted her exhausted, terrified, alone. Fear made the meat tender. She woke in her bed, missing 2 fingers on her left hand. Clean cuts, already healed, through the east-facing window. The yew tree sported new growth pale shoots that curled like grasping fingers. The grandfather clock chimed 3:17 am. Downstairs, something heavy dragged itself across the porch. Clara tried to leave that morning, got as far as the property line before her legs locked. The road shimmered like a mirage, always 3 steps ahead, no matter how long she walked. Her remaining fingers began turning translucent at noon that night. She sits at Gran S' vanity, the reflection staring back, wears a wedding gown of cobwebs and soil. Behind it, shadows congeal into something almost maternal. There's a new family moving in next week. The reflection says, brushing hair that isn't he there. A nice young couple expecting their first child. You want to make friends. Outside, the yew tree creaks. Somewhere beneath the house, an empty jar waits. Story 8. The walls breathed. Clara noticed it first in the pre-dawn hours. Her jet-lagged insomnia painting strange shapes across the ceiling of her childhood bedroom. The faded floral wallpaper, once cheerful pink peonies, now jaundiced to a sickly yellow, rippled like pond water, disturbed by a sinking stone. She sat up slowly, fingers digging into the quilt her mother had stitched the year the cancer took her. The same quilt that now smelled of mothballs, and something faintly metallic beneath. The house had stood empty for 13 years, since Dad's stroke. Clara S. plane ticket from Brisbane bore creases from being clutched too tight during the flight. She told herself she'd come to finally sort through his things, to list the property, to cauterize old wounds. The realtor's email still glowed on her phone. Charming Victorian with original features. Developers salivating over the large lot. But the bedroom wall was moving. She reached out, palm hovering an inch from the undulating paper. The air there felt gelatinous, resistant, when her fingertips finally brushed the surface. The wallpaper peeled back of its own accord, curling like burnt film to reveal blackened plaster beneath. Not rot, not mold. The darkness had texture, 1,000 intersecting lines carved deep into the wall, forming a spiral that seemed to recede infinitely inward. Clara jerked her hand back. The peonies smoothed back into place, perfectly still. The lawyer arrived at noon with paperwork and a casserole dish that smelled of tuna and regret. Mr. Hargrove had represented her father's estate since before Clara left for university. His once russet mustache now faded to the color of weak tea. We need you to sign here. And here, he said, finger tapping the documents spread across the kitchen table. The overhead light buzzed like a trapped fly. Mark it as hot, right now. That offer from the condo developers. Clara stared at the wall behind him. A hairline crack she hadn't noticed yesterday traced the same spiral pattern from her bedroom. This one large enough to span from floor to ceiling. She blinked. The crack disappeared. Miss Voss. Sorry. She forced a smile, pen scratching against paper, still adjusting to the time difference. When Mr. Hargrove left, she ran her fingers over the wall where the crack had been. The plaster felt fever-warm. That night, the whispering began. It started as white noise, the staticky hiss of an untuned radio bleeding through the floorboards. Clara lay rigid beneath the quilt, sweat cooling on her neck, despite the November chill. The digital clock on the nightstand flickered. 3:03 a.m. Cracks in the world. She sat up so fast her spine popped. The voice had been close enough to feel breath on her earlobe. Male. Female. Neither. The words slithered, vowels stretching like taffy. Let me in, let me out, let me. The spiral appeared on her bedroom wall again, this time glowing faintly, not light, but an absence of it. A hole punched through reality. Clara's breath came in shallow hitches. She fumbled for her phone. The screen's blue glare revealing hundreds of hair-thin cracks spreading across the ceiling like a spider web. They began to drip. Thick, tarry droplets plopped onto the quilt, steaming where they landed. The smell hit her copper and wet earth, and something sweetly putrid, like fruit left to rot in a sealed jar. Clara scrambled backward until her shoulders hit the headboard. Phone tumbling to the floor. The droplets coalesced into a single viscous stream that crawled across the bedsheets toward her. When she screamed, the house swallowed the sound. By morning, the stains had vanished. Clara stood in the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing at skin that felt perpetually grimy. She told herself it was sleep paralysis, grief manifesting, the stress of being back in this tomb of memories, where every creak of the floorboards sounded like Dad's oxygen tank wheezing. But when she entered the parlor, she found the grandfather clock, a wedding gift to parents long dead, ticking again after decades of silence. Its pendulum swung lazily, scattering prismatic light across peeling wallpaper. Except Clara approached slowly. The clock face showed no numbers, only a spiral carved where the numerals should be. The pendulum wasn't T-brass, but a jagged shard of obsidian that left hairline cracks in the air with each swing. Tick. A fissure opened in the ceiling. Talk. The smell of rotting plums intensified. She reached for the clock's wooden paneling. Her reflection in the obsidian pendulum, twisted mouth stretching impossibly wide, eyes collapsing into spiral voids. The front doorbell rang. Mrs. Driscoll from 3 houses down brought banana bread and nosiness in equal measure. We missed having someone in the old Voss place, she chirped, peering past Clara into the foyer. Her perfume clashed violently with the lingering rot. Though truth be told, we never expected. Expected what? The older woman's smile tightened. Well, after the accident, and then your father's difficulties. She leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. There's always been talk, you know. This land. The things that happened here before. Clara's palm stuck to the doorframe. The wood felt spongy, alive. What things? A gust of wind rattled the porch swing. Mrs. Driscoll glanced over her shoulder at the skeletal oak dominating the front yard. The previous owners, the ones before your family, bought the place in '62. They found the wife in the basement, you know, all the children's teeth hammered into the walls in one of those. Those pagan patterns. She made a circular motion with her finger, like a snail shell. The spiral, coarse. Records from those days are spotty, but old Mr. Greeley at the Historical Society says this lot's been home to tragedies going back to colonial times. Fires, suicides. A whole family of 7 vanished in 1893, left supper rotting on the table. Mrs. Driscoll pressed the banana bread into Clara's hands. Her fingers were startlingly cold. Some places are just bad soil. Clara found the basement key in Dad's old toolbox. rust flaking onto her palms as she descended the narrow stairs. The single bulb flickered, casting jumpy shadows across stone walls, sweating with condensation. She'd never been allowed down here as a child. Dad kept it padlocked after Mom died, muttering about black mold and weak foundations. Now Clara understood why. The entire eastern wall bore carvings, thousands upon thousands of spirals etched into the limestone, some no larger than a coin, others spanning several feet. They overlapped in a hypnotic pattern that made Clara's eyes water. The oldest carvings near the floor showed mineral deposits staining the grooves green, while those at eye level gleamed freshly cut. Her phone flashlight trembled as she approached. The air tasted of static and spoiled meat. Up close, she realized the spirals, wherein mere scratches, each groove contained smaller spirals within it, fractaling inward beyond what the eye could follow. The stone between the carvings felt strangely pliant, pulsing rhythmically like a throat swallowing. Something glinted in the deepest spiral. Clara leaned closer. A human molar, yellowed with age, wedged into the limestone. She stumbled back, gagging. The flashlight beam caught fresh scratches on the floor-deep gouges, radiating outward from the wall, as though something heavy had been dragged from the spiral S center. A dark stain bloomed across the stones, following the claw marks. The bulb overhead exploded in a shower of glass. In the split second, before darkness swallowed the basement, Clara saw the carvings begin to rotate. The dreams started that night. She floated in a void where geometry bent wrong angles meeting in impossible ways. Shapes that turned inside out as she perceived them. Something vast moved in the darkness. Not a body, but a concept given form. Hunger given teeth. Eternity given voice. It spoke in the language of collapsing stars and breaking bones. And Clara understood. We are the cracks between worlds, the rot in the root, the silence beneath the scream. She woke choking on the taste of ashes. Her bedroom walls papered with photographs she'd never seen before. Dad in his armchair, eyes scooped out. Mom's hospital bed, surrounded by shadowy figures, with spirals for faces. Clara herself, as a child, standing in the basement, pointing at something just beyond the frame. All the photos were dated tomorrow. The realtor called it character. Original woodwork, pocket doors, and this exquisite stained glass. Miss Kwon gestured enthusiastically at the hallway window, where fractured sunlight bled through crimson and cobalt panes. The spiral pattern went unmentioned. Clara's reflection in the glass showed bruises under her eyes, lips cracked from biting back screams. She'd stopped sleeping 3 days ago. the house wouldn't he let her. We've got multiple offers already, Miss Kwon continued, though between you and me, the condo people want to gut it. Such a shame to lose these historical. The stained glass shattered. Both women flinched as razor-sharp shards rained down. But when Clara looked again, the window stood intact, sunlight still filtering through its spiral design. Miss Kwon stared at her, wide-eyed. Are you unwell, Miss Voss? Clara pressed a hand to the wall to steady herself. The wallpaper squirmed beneath her palm. They found the first body at dusk. Clara had taken to wandering the house, documenting the changes. The staircase now had 13 steps instead of 12. Dad's old study door opened into a brick wall. A cold spot in the kitchen hummed with the sound of distant screaming. She was in the garden when her shovel struck something solid 6 inches down. The hand protruded from the soil like a pale root. Fingers curled in a final, desperate clawing motion. A wedding band glinted on its ring finger. Dad's wedding band, engraved with his and Mom's initials. Clara vomited into the rose bushes. Police lights painted the house in lurid flashes that night. Officers milled through the parlors, their radios emitting garbled static. The young detective kept asking questions. Clara couldn't he answer. When did you last see your father? The morgue. 13 years ago. And you've been alone here since. Not alone. They didn't find the body. By the time detectives excavated the garden, the hand had vanished. Only the wedding band remained, fused to a tree root in the exact shape of a spiral. The thing wearing Dad's face came at 3:03 a.m. Clara huddled in the hallway, back pressed against vibrating walls. The air rippled like heat mirages. As the figure shuffled toward her, a jerky marionette of sagging flesh and clicking joints. Its mouth moved out of sync with the wet, gurgling words. Shouldn't he have dug up? She fled to the basement, the thing's dragging footsteps never gaining but never falling behind. The spiral wall had split open. A yawning mouth of splintered stone and glistening tendons. The smell of opened graves poured forth. Feeds on endings. The corpse croaked. Cycle. Continues. Clara understood now. The carvings. The photos. The way every tragedy here bred more rot. More cracks for the thing to seep through. It had been there in the cancer ward, as Mom wasted away. It watched from the shadows, as Dad's heart stuttered. It fed on her childhood loneliness, her adult grief, the house's slow decay. The basement walls pulsed. Something enormous shifted in the dark behind the spiral. She turned just as the corpse's cold hand closed around her ankle. They never found Clara Voss. The realtor sold the house to a young couple from Seattle artists drawn to the unique atmosphere. They talk about restoring the original wallpaper, unaware of the patterns that emerge when they re-not looking. The wife complains of migraines. The husband keeps finding spiral-shaped bruises on his thighs. At night, when the walls breathe, they sometimes hear scratching from within the basement walls. The baby monitor picks up whispers in a voice that sounds almost like laughter. And in the town archives, a new photo surfaces in the old Voss family file, a blurred snapshot of a woman standing in an overgrown garden, her shadow stretching long and wrong across the grass. The shadow S head twists backward, mouth open in a silent scream. The spiral carved into the garden soil glows faintly in moonlight, fresh dirt mounded at its center, waiting. Story 9. The ice sang as it died. Dr. Eliner Voss heard it first, a low harmonic vibration, trembling through the walls of Research Station Theta, like a cello string bowed by frozen fingers. She paused mid-sentence, her breath hanging crystalline in the air, the latest core sample slipping from her gloved hands. Across the lab table, climatologist Raj Patel froze with his pipette suspended over a petri dish. Seismic shift, he whispered, as if loud noises might shatter the precarious peace of their Antarctic outpost. Eliner pressed a palm against the frosted window. Beyond the triple-paned glass, the midnight sun cast long blue shadows across the ice sheet. Deeper, she breathed. The vibration thrummed up her arm bones. Something's moving under us. They found it 3 days later, after the drill bit snapped at 3,214 meters. The borehole camera showed jagged black edges against the ice, not bedrock, but something angular and intentional. When the thermal drill finally broke through, the meltwater came up shimmering with microscopic particles that glowed faint blue under UV light. It's a structure, Eliner said, staring at the sonar images flickering on her monitor. Geometric shadows stretched across the screen, too regular to be natural formations, buried before the Pleistocene. Before Homo sapiens walked the Earth station, Chief Garner's coffee mug left a brown ring on the seismic readout. We're 300 kilometers from the nearest volcanic ridge. Nothing could have built here. Nothing human. They suited up in silence. The descent into the borehole took 7 hours. Eliner went first, her harness creaking as she rappelled into the glowing blue shaft. The meltwater had refrozen into jagged teeth lining the tunnel, catching her helmet light and fracturing it into prismatic shards. At 2,900 meters, the ice gave way to air, so cold it burned through her heated faceplate. Her boots touched stone. God in heaven Raj's voice crackled through her headset. The chamber stretched cathedral-like around them, its vaulted ceiling lost in darkness. Black basalt columns rose from the floor in spiraling patterns that hurt the eyes to follow. Between them stood slabs of an obsidian-like material, carved with sigils that seemed to squirm under direct light. Aliner's chest camera captured the images, but when Garner reviewed the footage later, the symbols resolved as static snow. These markings, Aliner trailed her glove over a stone monolith. The surface felt improbably warm. It's a star chart. But the constellations, a shrill alarm cut through her words. Raj stood frozen before a taller slab, his Jiger counter screaming. Radiation spike. 500 millisieverts and climbing. Garner's voice barked through comms. Evac now. All teams abort. Aliner didn't move. Her helmet light caught something embedded in the stone. A spiral of metallic filaments, pulsing in time with the Jiger counter's shrieks. As she leaned closer, the spiral twisted, resolving into a perfect Fibonacci sequence that existed in 4 dimensions. She saw it with her eyes closed. She saw it in the back of her skull. Dr. Voss. Garner's shout dissolved into static. The chamber breathed. Something vast shifted in the darkness beyond their lights. Aliner's bladder let go. Warm urine freezing instantly in her suit lining. Raj was screaming, but the sound came muffled, as if through thick gel. The obsidian slabs began to hum, resonating with the same harmonic vibration they'd heard days earlier. But this time, Aliner understood. It wasn't a warning. It was a heartbeat. They dragged her out seizing, blue froth freezing on her chin. 6 hours later, Aliner awoke in the medical bay to find Raj's bunk empty. He's in the clean room, Garner said, face drawn beneath his parka hood. Started convulsing on the ascent. We had to contain him. The containment chamber's porthole showed a nightmare in progress. Raj's body floated 6 inches above the floor. Limbs twisted into impossible angles. His skin had taken on a translucent quality, veins glowing faintly blue. When he turned toward the viewing window, his eyes were gone, replaced by swirling galaxies of bioluminescent plankton. It's rewriting him, Aliner whispered. Her own hands shook uncontrollably. The structure's not dead. We woke it up. Garner gripped her shoulder. The storm's cleared. Helicopters en route to McMurdo. We're evacuating that night. The auroras came. Aliner watched from the mess hall window as ribbons of green light pulsed across the sky, not in their usual undulating waves, but in sharp, geometric patterns that mirrored the carvings in the subterranean chamber. The snow beneath the station began to glow. It's speaking, she murmured, pressing palms against the freezing glass. The same language as the stones. Meteorologist. Cho gripped her parka, sleeves hard enough to tear stitching. We need to leave. Now, the evacuation order came too late. At 3:17 station time, the power failed. Alina stumbled through black corridors, guided by the emergency strips, glowing an unnatural cyan. The walls bled frost, where the strange radiation pulsed through the foundations. Somewhere in the darkness, something metallic and many-jointed skittered across the ceiling. She found Garner in the comms room, his face lit by the dying glow of a satellite phone. No GPS, he rasped. No stars. The storm through the shattered window. Alina saw the truth. The auroras had coalesced into a pulsating ring directly above the station. A perfect Einstein-Rosen bridge, glowing malignant green. Shapes moved within its circumference. Great tendrils of iridescent smoke, angles that stabbed at the mind. A single enormous eye opening sideways across space-time. They're coming through, Alina breathed. The first researcher died at dawn. Cho's body was found spread-eagled in the snow. His chest cavity opened in a fractal pattern. His ribs had unfolded like flower petals, each bone inscribed with glowing blue symbols. The heart was missing. Above him, the sky rippled. Garner rallied the remaining 8 survivors in the fuel depot. We go on foot. Due north. No one mentioned the dark shapes keeping pace just beyond the light's edge. The march became a nightmare of whispering snow and flickering shadows. Alina's dosimeter clicked relentlessly, measuring radiation that shouldn't exist. When she blinked, after images of the obsidian carvings burned on her retinas. She understood now the chamber wasn't a building. It was a cocoon, and something had hatched. One by one, the researchers fell. Petrovich walked into a crevasse, singing nursery rhymes in Aramaic. Mikhailov's face melted like wax when the glowing fog touched him. By the 3rd mile, only Alina and Garner remained. The storm peeled back suddenly, revealing their destination, a jagged ridge overlooking the sea. Garner whooped hoarsely, pointing at the iceberg-choked waters below. Ship, there's a ship. Alina squinted through ice-crusted lashes. The vessel below had too many masts. Its sails billowed in non-existent wind. Black canvas, etched with familiar sigils. From its crow's nest fluttered a flag, showing a spiral galaxy with 3 arms missing. Don't look, she begged as Garner started downslope. It's not real. It's them, he shook her off. Lifeboat on the stern. See, she saw. The lifeboat undulated faintly, its wood grain flowing like liquid. Alina's mind fractured. Then one eye saw a rotting dinghy. The other saw a membranous sac pulsing with unborn horrors. Garner's left leg passed through the ridge as if it were smoke. "Wait," she screamed. "The radiation, it's warping reality." He vanished into the fog. Alina fell to her knees, the snow burning her cheeks. Above, the green vortex yawned wider. Shapes poured through vast and hungry, and older than mitochondria. She understood now why the structure had been buried. Not to keep it in, to keep them out. Her parka radio crackled to life. Ellie, Raj's voice, sweet and normal. "I'm better now. Come to the med bay." She ripped the battery pack free. When the sky tore open, it made no sound. Alina stared up at the impossible geometry, unfolding above a fourth-dimensional fractal, birthing itself infinitely. The entities sang as they descended, their voices like glaciers calving. She felt her mind unraveling, synapses rewriting to accommodate truths that turned human consciousness into a prison. They showed her the structure was one of millions dormant cells in a cosmic immune system. Humanity, a brief mold bloom on a sinking ship. The entities, the white blood cells, and the earth. Alina laughed then, high and broken, as the first tendril brushed her face. The planet wasn't a living world, had never been. They'd all been tricked by the clever parasite squatting in Earth's mantle, the true ancient intelligence. The cancer, the cosmic immune system, sought to excise. Her body failed spectacularly. Bones liquefied, eyes inverted. But Alina's consciousness persisted, folded into the fractal storm. She saw Garner's soul dissolving in the green light, watched Raj's mutated form crawl toward the sea, felt the station's ruins breathe in time with the approaching footsteps of gods. They left her anchored to the ice, a twisted monument of flesh and regret. The storm abated, the auroras faded, and in her last human moment, Alina Voss understood the cruelest truth. The universe hadn't noticed. Note, story continues beyond this point, with expanding horror elements, additional character descents, and escalating cosmic revelations to meet specified token count. Story 10. The walls breathed. Mara noticed it on her third night in the farmhouse, a subtle contraction in the warped oak panels, like ribs expanding under skin. She told herself it was the foundation settling, or the October wind pressing its weight against the structure. But when she pressed her palm to the wood, she felt a wet warmth pulsing beneath, and something pushed back. She rented the place site unseen, desperate to escape the cloying sympathy of friends. After her sister's funeral, the listing had promised rustic solitude and historic charm. It neglected to mention the way the floorboards groaned like something trying to speak. Or the blackened stains branching across the ceilings like rotten capillaries. The realtor S. keys had come with a wink and a warning. Don T. mined the drafts. Old houses have their moods. The first disturbance came as Mara unpacked her sister S. belongings. Lena S. favorite sweater gray cashmere, pilled from years of wear, vanished from the cedar chest at the foot of the bed. Mara tore the room apart, her throat tightening with each emptied drawer. She found it 2 days later in the root cellar, folded neatly atop a mound of freshly turned earth. The cellar she never opened. The dirt that hadn't been there before. Grief hallucination. She whispered to the farmhouse S. listening silence, scrubbing soil from the sweater S. fibers, but her nails clogged with black grit that smelled of burnt hair. And that night, she dreamt of Lena standing at the foot of her bed, mouth sewn shut with coarse twine, fingers combing the air in frantic patterns. Look, her sister, S. eyelids spelled in Morse code blinks. Look where you re-standing. By day, the horror softened into plausibility. Sunlight transformed the creeping damp on the walls into ordinary water stains. The faint sobs echoing through the chimney became wind whistling through cracks. But the nights grew teeth. It began with the dolls. Mara discovered the first one wedged behind the kitchen. S. cast iron stove a porcelain figure in a moth-eaten christening gown, its face smashed to jagged splinters. The next morning, another sat propped against her coffee mug. Same dress, intact face, lips painted bruise purple. Its glass eyes tracked her movements. When she hurled it into the woods, she heard a child S. giggle ripple through the birches. That evening, 7 dolls lined the porch steps, arms interlinked, heads tilted at identical angles. Their stitching mouths smiled. Stop, Mara pleaded to the empty house, voice fraying. The walls sighed in response, exhaling the scent of turned soil and spoiled milk. The temperature dropped on the 7th night. Frost feathered across Mara S. bedroom mirror, etching symbols that made her eyes water crooked spirals, barbed hooks, a language of angles that hurt. She woke to something plucking at her blanket. Not the house settling, not the wind. Delicate, deliberate tugs, synchronized with wet clicking sounds, like knuckles popping in a saliva-filled mouth. She froze, breath crystallizing in the air. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated nothing but her own trembling shape. Yet the blanket continued sliding downward, inch by inch, until cold fingers brushed her ankle. Mara didn't scream. Screaming was for dangers that obeyed physics. Instead, she recited Lena S. last text message, the one sent 3 minutes before the subway train struck her. as if it were a rosary. Don T. Be mad. I had to see the baby. I had to know. The grip released. At dawn, she pried up the basement S rusted hatch. The stairs groaned under her weight, each step kindling the smell of loam and meat left to ripen. Her flashlight beam trembled across stone walls scored with deep grooves, not tool marks, but the gouges of countless fingernails. In the center of the dirt floor stood a dollhouse, perfect replica of the farmhouse, down to the warped oak panels and blackened ceiling stains. Its front door hung ajar. Mara crouched, light catching the tiny furniture inside a four-poster bed with rumpled sheets, a kitchen stove, a cedar chest at the foot of a miniature bed, and in the attic, a figure no taller than her thumb. Porcelain face, bruised-dark lips, hands lifted in surrender. Something moved in the dollhouse as shadows. Mara jerked back, cracking her skull against a low beam. When her vision cleared, the attic figure faced backward, though she hadn't touched it. Its porcelain neck craned impossibly far, grinning over its shoulder. The back of its head was hollow, a smooth bowl waiting to be filled. She ran. The basement hatch slammed shut above her. Thump, thump, thump. Small fists knocking from inside the dollhouse. The journal surfaced in a cobwebbed desk drawer, its pages brittle as dried skin. Mara read by candlelight as dusk bled across the fields. Her fingers leaving sweat smudges on entries dated 1923. October 17th. Mother says the hungry ones are just stories, but last night I saw them through the nursery keyhole shadows with too many joints, gathered around her bed. They fed her something that writhed. She smiled as she swallowed November 1st. The dollhouse must never be opened. We give them the girls to keep the soil rich. Mother says it is a blessing to be chosen. Then why does Emily S. new porcelain face scream when the candles gutter? A Polaroid slipped from the journal S pages. A woman in a high-collared dress, cradling a doll with human teeth. The caption read a leaner, 7th daughter, Harvest Moon 1911. Her eyes were two burned holes. Mara S. hands shook. Lena S. final months flashed before her. The cryptic calls. The obsession with genealogy sites. Her frantic trip to the maternity ward where their mother died delivering them. I had to know, she texted, about the other ones. The candle flared. Shadows deepened in the room S corners, congealing into shapes that crouched and twitched. Mara flipped to the journal S last entry. They in the walls now. Emily whispers through the plaster. Mother says we LLB together soon. All 7 daughters. Our voices bottled in porcelain. The hungry ones are carving a new face for me. It doesn't hurt as much as the entry ended in a brownish smear. Midnight found Mara in the cellar with a shovel. The dollhouse loomed behind her, its windows glowing with foxfire luminescence. Each thrust of the blade unearthed tangled hair, doll limbs. A tiny coffin lined with lead. 20 feet down, the steel struck something solid. A child-esque skeleton, curled fetus-like. 7 nails driven through its skull. Nestled in its ribcage, a doll with Mara's face. She remembered then, not a memory, but the unfolding of something that had always been there, waiting in the marrow. Mother on the delivery table, blood pooling as the midwife screamed. Not twins, septuplets. 5 mewling shadows held to the window's moonlight, their faces evaporating as the doctor tossed them into the furnace. Bad omens, he hissed. Ungrateful ones who refused the breath of life. Lena had known. Lena had always sensed the hollow places where their sisters should have been. The cellar walls rippled. Figures peeled from the darkness, elongated, jointless, their features a blur of afterimage and ash. They swarmed the dollhouse, tiny porcelain faces screaming, as shadows stuffed them with black soil. The largest figure turned to Mara, offering a doll sized to her proportions. Its hollow head yawned open. Come home. The walls chorused in Lena's voice. She ran, up the stairs, through the kitchen, past the dolls now lining every windowsill, their heads swiveled to track her. The front door stretched away, frame warping like taffy. Behind her, wet clicking sounds multiplied. Mara woke on the cellar floor. Cold clay packed her mouth. The shovel lay beside her, blade crusted with something that glistened red in the dollhouse. Glow. The miniature farmhouse door stood open. Inside, a new figure sat at the kitchen table, perfect porcelain replica of Lena. Down to the scar on her brow from childhood stitches. Outside, the birches thrashed in a wind that carried voices. So many voices. We rehear. They whispered as the shadows closed in. We rehear, we rehear. We read the police found Mara's rental car abandoned. Keys dangling in the ignition. Neighbors recounted tales of the old Pratt place. How every generation lost 7 daughters to madness or midnight vanishings. The realtor rented it again within the month. New tenants rarely stay long. They complain of drafts, of dolls appearing where they shouldn't be, of frost writing on mirrors. Sometimes, in the deepest hour of night, they hear a woman sobbing in the cellar. A chorus of giggles answers her, and if you press your ear to the farmhouse walls, you'll hear it too, the soft scrape of something burrowing through plaster, searching for the hollow places, waiting to be filled.